Dr. Nair, let me come back to you, talking about the human race, talking about humanity, management, talent management. How is this done from home suddenly? Because I don't think that chapter was being equipped for, right?
Yeah, that definitely wasn't. And in fact, for I think for many, many years, people have been talking about, how you need to revisit structures around work, arrangements around work. For years we've been talking about things like flexi and job sharing and telecommuting, but I don't think it has caught on to this level. Even education, if you take, or even higher education for that matter, right? We always assume that you have to have face-to-face training, you have to be sitting there and all of that. And yes, in an ideal world, that's the best scenario. But now with COVID, we're forced to do that, right? We're forced to do that. And as Frederick pointed out, we're not always prepared, right? You can't just take a class that you've been teaching to 200 people in a lecture hall and put that online and expect that it's going to go the same way. It's not, The challenge, though, is that's the challenge. Challenge is many of us are not prepared, right? How many teachers? I mean, you take even India, big countries like that, even Malaysia for that matter, 10,000 schools, 400,000 teachers, excluding university lecturers, right? And then, of course, office workers. Those in industry, I think, can learn to adapt a little bit quicker because especially if you're from the private sector, you're more used to changing environments and you can adapt a little better. Those that had already started embarking on their digital transformation journeys, what we have observed in Malaysia at least is they have been less impacted. The ones that have been most impacted are those that were resisting that change and were all this while saying, we don't need to do it, you can't do it, it's not going to happen. They now have been impacted. So there's a sort of a race, to try and address these gaps, to retrain people, trying to figure out how do you deliver a lot of services that you previously were doing offline. How do you now deliver that online? So a lot of those kind of thinking happening, but I must say we are probably far from figuring things out because even like you take again education, for years we've known that the education system does not fit what the future workforce needs. And we've been having trouble changing it, right? But now is the time when we can actually say, okay, it's already happening. This is that wake-up call. It's happened now. So we're trying to pull everybody together to say, now's the time. We gotta seize the moment and really start to think, how are we going to revolutionize? It's a revolution that you need, right, to do this. How are you going to revolutionize a lot of things that we have been used to, traditional systems and structures, for this new beginning, this new norm? So, as my children put it, I've got 2 teenagers at home, and they say, this is a reset button for the world. Right? And are we gonna treat it as a reset, or are we gonna treat it as, okay, this is a temporary thing and let's go back to how it was before this? Hopefully not, right? Hopefully not.
No, and you're spot on. In fact, I think the limitation that I thought educational institutions have was the brick and mortar. And suddenly, this has made that change totally, right? So you can expand that classroom and it's being accepted by the human race, right? Which is pretty cool now because I think it will change the parameters of lots of higher educations, But there's a different thing with the younger generation. But yeah, with the higher and the older generation, there's going to be a very, very fascinating switch, and I can't wait to see how it develops because it is at its early stage. No, thank you for that, Asif, sir. Now you had a plan, but cybersecurity and cyber attacks have increased significantly, right? How are you coping with that? What's the current plan or the new plan that you guys are putting in play?
Yeah, so I think we all know the word called the black swan situation. So you may think of all the risks, but the one which you could never think of is the one which happens, and that's what it is. Like you have DR and BCP. It's like it's a scenario, it's a situation, it's for a few days, and it affects a certain thing, and then you are back. But here it is like we don't know what's happening and how long and when, and everything has changed. So Same thing. What was happening in all the other sectors where things were getting digitized, and the what do you say? Finally, a reset button was set. Things had to drastically change in the way it should be, so that if there is a situation where you don't have any resources, you don't have infrastructure, you don't have people can't commute, or transportation is affected, or something, whatever, everything gets affected, you still should be able to survive. So you need to now look at all those factors and say how you can do your work. So same thing with like resources. Do you want to have everybody sitting in office, or you have people sitting all over the place? Do you want to have permanent employees, or do you want to have contract services, so that if the person is sick, you can get the other person, or you have a backup where you can get a lot of people who can support you. So those kind of thoughts are going in, and we are trying to now break up security into different modules, and the way the providers are there, which we can provide you an integrated solution where when a person is in office or is somewhere else, he can be provided a secure access to what he needs to do his work. So everybody doesn't need everything all the time. You may need a certain thing to do something, and you may just need access to that. And then when you do something else, you need access to that. So things and applications and all that now will be very modular and broken up. So for example, if you give somebody access to SAP in the earlier days, you give him access to everything. He can do his payroll, he can do his leave, he can do something else, he can apply for all that. But that's not what it is. If he wants to do pay slip, or I want to apply for leave, I just go into a leave module, apply for leave and out. I don't need access to anything else at all. So now application development, access, and all that has to be now thought of is what the person needs, and make it so small, and it should be so simple and so reliant and resilient, so that if that breaks, nothing else breaks. And that's why in the whole of security now, you want to break up authentication, you want to give him multi-factor, you want to give him access from his personal device. So we need to be able to check all that and then give him the appropriate level of authentication and access to what information he needs. And then all these services have to be reliable and backed up by enough resources and people. So that if it's not that you have one person looking after one service, and when he's sick, you just can't do anything about it. So that's what it is, changing the whole model of security as like a managed service.
And you're absolutely right. It is, and that just leads me to the next, very natural question to Sonny, you, because yes, you're right. We can give people limited access so they can do their job. The problem is when you have a workforce that's the size of a country, and yes, you've gone digital with it. The next challenge is to keep the talent level up and the motivation level up. How are you overcoming that? How are you tackling that?
So again, on this, I have a very positive viewpoint. The biggest challenge in any digital transformation exercise is changing culture, making people adopt and adapt to the new way of doing things. Not only your customers, but also your staff. Sometimes the biggest resistance you face is internal rather than with your customers, because your customers may be prepared to change. They are seeing that change elsewhere, but that change is not very visible to your internal staff, to your internal customer. The biggest positive from the pandemic was that we did not have to convince people that you have to go digital, that this is the new way of doing things, that this is the only way you can do things, because it was so evident to everyone that if you need to contact a customer to sell a product, you can't deliver it in a branch the way you used to do it earlier, because branches were just providing bare essential services, not the full range. You could not have we could not provide the full range of services that we were doing earlier because of various restrictions from authorities on the number of staff who can come to a branch. We also had exemptions of various categories of people whom we felt should not work because of issues around disabilities or around health or any other health conditions that they had. So when you're working from a remote location, when you're working from home, the only way you could reach out to a customer was through digital means. And if your customer was not migrated to a digital channel, then you did not have a way in which you could sell your products. And because of this, what we have seen is that our staff, our people are onboarding customers on digital channels with a vengeance. They are trying to do. They are trying to see that every customer migrates as quickly as possible to a digital channel, so that the fulfillment of his journey or his requirements can be done digitally. And this does not only extend to, say, fund transfers or that sort of stuff, but also anything that a customer needs. Because today in our digital channels, what we have built is a super app which provides everything. It's not only financial, but also anything that you need for your lifestyle requirements. You want to shop, you want to book something, all that is possible. You want to invest, you want to insure, everything is possible. So this is the biggest gain of this, the last 3 months, is the sea change in the attitude of people that yes, digital is the only way forward. And as Dr. Nair said, are we going to return to the earlier situation? I doubt it. This is going to be the new normal, and this is the way we are going to work.
Perfect. No, that's awesome. I like the way this whole thing is transitioning. Frederick, your reflection on what you're hearing?
Yes. So it was a lot about the work from home situation or the new normal. I tend to think that people, again, hate change. Some embrace change, but this is only 5% of the population, and nobody wants a new normal. Everybody wants to be back to normal, how it was before, good and nice, and going to a restaurant and enjoying life with friends. Nobody wants a new normal. But yes, we will have to adapt to some different circumstances, at least until we get a vaccine. Now, for tech people, it's not too much of a change. There is indeed a change, but there is a lot of people in tech who for the past 10 years probably have been working entirely remotely. I see some people in the UK, it's impossible to live in London and work in London because you would spend your time in your car basically commuting and not working. So there's a lot of people who live 2 hours away because it's also so expensive to live in London that they have been working from home for the past 10 years or 15 years. So for the tech industry, that's a given. For the banks, yes, this is a big discovery, and we have a certain number of large banks among our customers, and they're discovering how to work from home with its advantages and its drawbacks. It brings gains, but also losses of productivity. So, for example, you will reduce the travel time, which is good, but and gives you more productivity. On the other hand, you have an increased risk of security breaches, and then you will create some new critical events, and you can mitigate that with some critical event management software, but you will increase these risks. Connectivity risks as well, because people in your help desks, your call center, customer support, well, you need to get them to work from home. And this is actually possible in almost every industry, as long as you don't have a physical interaction with a machine or with a person, which if you're a masseur is needed. But if you're a customer representative at a bank, actually you don't need to see your customer. You can interact with them remotely, or your customer can interact with a computer. Actually, when I choose a bank, the first thing I'm looking at is how performing is the IT system, and how can I do my internet banking. So there's a lot of changes here. I still think that we are going into a hybrid model where the share of remote working is increasing. And therefore, for that, we need to have all the proper security procedures put in place. Bring your own device for the laptop or desktop or mobile devices by containerizing applications between what's private and what's public and what's professional. But also, equip people to work from home, from the company, providing them the right connectivity, and making sure that this is done with no disruption in communication, and this is done in a proper security fashion.
Yeah, no, thank you. That makes sense. And you're right. It is the hybrid model that I also see going forward. But what's really fascinating for me is being in Southeast Asia for the last decade, actually 12 years. I've been trying to preach that. But you know what? Culture eats all strategy for breakfast. Culture was very hard to change, and we can strategize as much. The whole the habitual habit of people saying, "Where's my staff? They got to be in front of me because that's the only time they work. They don't work from home." So it's interesting, and you're right about productivity. What I'm also seeing is it's very different working from home when everything around you is completely shut. No malls were open, no shops were open, no movie theaters, nobody was going and visiting. It's a very different ball game when everything is open and you're still at home. So we haven't experienced that wave yet, and I'm quite fascinated to see how that's going to react.